This woman is the most beautiful in the small town. Countless men have pursued her, but she told all her suitors to go find phantom books. If anyone finds phantom books, she will marry that person. But what exactly is phantom books? No one knows. And this whole story begins with a man named Sir Disward. 6 months ago, Sir Disward suddenly passed away. He left his estate to his grandson, Hugh. Hugh arrived at the old manor. The mansion had been abandoned for a long time. Dust covered everything. Yet, Hugh found traces of human activity. He followed the traces to the basement. There, the basement was filled with all kinds of books. A girl in a black dress suddenly appeared in front of him. Hugh approached and briefly introduced himself, saying he was the grandson of the manor's owner, and was looking for a bookshelf called Dantalian. It turns out that Sir Disward was a passionate book collector. In his will, he specifically mentioned that if Hugh wanted to inherit his estate, he must first find the Dantalian bookshelf. But what intrigued Hugh the most was the last sentence in the will, that Dalian must be entrusted to him. At first, Hugh thought Dalian was a small dog his grandfather had kept, but the mention of this phrase made the girl furious. It turns out that Dalian was the girl's name. Where was the bookshelf named Dantalian located? Dalian did not tell him immediately. She was cautious of this sudden new owner of the manor, but Hugh was curious about both Dalian and the bookshelf called Dantalian. He had heard some legends about it. It was said to be a bookshelf full of endless books, ruled by a demon who controlled all knowledge. This legend made Hugh excited and eager to find the Dantalian bookshelf, but in the basement, all he found were just ordinary books. This left him somewhat disappointed. Dalian explained that the Dantalian bookshelf hid a library that contained boundless knowledge. When Hugh heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. Clearly, he didn't believe this claim. Just then, Dalian noticed the gold key around Hugh's neck. The sudden sound of a doorbell interrupted their conversation. It was the butler sent by the nearby noble, Jason, inviting Hugh to visit his home. Upon hearing this, Dalian immediately insisted on going with him. She suspected that Jason was the real culprit behind the death of Hugh's grandfather. They were both shocked as soon as they stepped inside. Gazing at the terrifying claw marks on the walls and the body lying on the floor, Dalian's expression instantly grew serious. She suggested they head to the study to search for clues. At that moment, a man holding a dagger suddenly attacked them. Hugh immediately grabbed Dalian and took cover, returning fire with his gun. To his surprise, the assassin, after being shot, turned into a pile of dust and vanished. Dalian carefully examined the dust on the ground and confirmed that it was indeed Jason who had stolen Hugh's grandfather's circus-themed book. Just then, a lion suddenly lunged at them. Hugh quickly aimed and fired several shots at the lion. As expected, the lion also turned into dust and disappeared. Dalian explained that the lion had been conjured from the circus-themed phantom book. She then revealed that phantom books shouldn't exist in this world. They granted their owners supernatural powers, and the only way to seal such dangerous phantom books was through the Dantalian bookshelf. Hugh's grandfather had originally intended to seal away the circus-themed phantom book, but it was stolen by Jason. By now, they had reached the door of the study, when suddenly, a giant dragon appeared before them. Hugh immediately fired his gun, but the bullets had no effect on the dragon. Hugh told Dalian to go on ahead, while he stayed behind to hold off the dragon. In that moment, Hugh's brave actions earned Dalian's respect. Dalian then asked him to take out the gold key. It turned out that Dalian was the manager of Dantalian's bookshelf. She instructed Hugh to take out the key and sign a soul contract with her. Hugh inserted the key into Dalian's chest, which was the entrance to the Dantalian bookshelf. Inside, over 900,000 phantom books were sealed away. At that moment, a thought crossed Hugh's mind. He took out a phantom book titled The Book of Fairies. Suddenly, an ancient and mysterious curse filled Hugh's mind. Holding the phantom book, he began chanting the incantation. At that moment, the phantom book emitted a dazzling light, and in an instant, it struck down the dragon. Finally, they found the phantom book deep in the study, but Jason had already been dead for some time. Clearly, he had not been recognized by the phantom book, and by forcibly using it, he had suffered a backlash. Afterward, Hugh and Dalian sealed away the disaster-bringing phantom book together. At that moment, Hugh finally understood that Dalian was the caretaker of Dantalian's bookshelf, and he himself had become the keeper of Dantalian's key. From that moment on, they would embark on their adventure together. The girl is cursed. Each of her boyfriends will meet a mysterious death. One day, Hugh and Dalian arrived at Colonel Leal's estate. but Leal had passed away 6 months ago. They were greeted by Leal's granddaughter, Mia. Miss Mia was graceful and poised, and Hugh immediately felt a fondness for her. Colonel Leal had been passionate about collecting books, but Mia didn't understand the true value of these books. That's why she wanted to commission Hugh to appraise them. Just then, a melodious bell rang throughout the estate. Miss Mia explained that it was the sound of the clock tower. Leal had made his fortune by patenting the music box, which had allowed him to build this very clock tower. At that moment, Mia's cousin, Robert, suddenly arrived. He introduced himself as Mia's current guardian. He visited the estate every week. Hugh found it strange that Mia was living alone in such a remote, wooded area. Robert sighed and explained that he didn't want her to live here alone, but rather due to a curse. Mia had been engaged multiple times, but all her fiancés had been brutally murdered. Anyone who tried to take her away from the house, including even her parents, had all met untimely deaths. Robert believed that Mia was cursed by a book of curses that had once belonged to Colonel Leal. That book was still hidden somewhere in the house. Hugh suddenly realized that Mia might be trapped by a phantom book here. He began searching through reports related to the estate. The reports mentioned a murder case that occurred 50 years ago, when Mia had not yet been born. In the following years, over 100 people had either been killed or disappeared. Strangely, the killings had stopped abruptly one day. However, recently, the murders had resumed, and this time they were linked to Mia. Hugh was certain that a phantom book must be the cause, but Dalian scoffed at his theory. She explained that phantom books only contain knowledge, and that there was no such thing as them cursing people. Just then, they saw Mia and Robert through the window. Dalian guessed that they must be involved in some illicit relationship, but Hugh told her that Robert was already married, which only made Dalian more certain of her suspicions. She believed that Robert must have asked Hugh to find the so-called cursed book, so that he could run away with Mia. At that moment, the bells of the tower rang out. A man's scream echoed from outside the house. Hugh rushed to the scene, only to find a monstrous creature, holding Robert's lifeless body. Mia, covered in blood, stood nearby. Without hesitation, Hugh drew his gun and fired at the creature, but it turned and fled, carrying Robert's body with it. Strangely, Mia showed no reaction to Robert's death. She simply stood there, muttering repeatedly, saying she had dirted her clothes again, and that her grandmother would scold her. The next day, Dalian had almost confirmed that all of this was caused by a phantom book called the Fetus Book. The creature from the night before had been summoned by this book. It resembled a fetus, without any consciousness of its own, and only followed the commands of its master. In other words, someone had ordered Robert's death. They immediately began investigating the mastermind behind it. Soon, Dalian made a new discovery. While going through Leal's family history, Mia's grandmother had been an immigrant from another country, and she had been suspected of being a serial killer. As a result, she had been exiled. Just then, Mia entered, pushing a trolley. Her behavior toward Hugh was ambiguous. She told Hugh that Robert and the servants he brought with him had vanished, and that she hoped Hugh would stay and keep her company, but Hugh politely declined. Seeing her request go unmet, Mia's emotions suddenly spiraled out of control. At that moment, the bells rang once again. Mia, holding a dinner knife, suddenly lunged at Hugh. Hugh asked her why she was doing this. Mia innocently explained that the affair between her and Robert had been discovered by his wife, so he could never return. To keep Robert by her side forever, Mia had to kill him. Only then could they be together forever. Just then, the wall exploded, and the monstrous creature from the night before emerged. Behind the wall, the bodies of all the servants were revealed. Dalian finally understood everything. It turned out that, within Leal's family, every generation had a woman with a strong impulse to kill. Thus, both Mia and her grandmother were murderers. In truth, the curse was not on the book, but on all the women in the Leal family. Dalian continued to explain that Colonel Leal knew his wife and granddaughter were born killers, so he had created the monster and ordered it to erase the traces of their crimes. At that moment, the creature attacked. Hugh quickly drew the key and unlocked the seal of Dantalian's bookshelf. He then retrieved a book called The Goddess of the Underworld and summoned a strong barrier. Next, he summoned a second phantom book, hoping to use its power to destroy the monster. However, the monster was unaffected. Dalian told him that to completely destroy the creature, he would need to find the phantom book that controlled it. Hugh recited another incantation, this time channeling the power of the phantom books. He aimed at the tower, and with a burst of energy, the tower crumbled, and the monster disintegrated into rubble. It turned out that Colonel Leal had hidden the phantom book inside the tower's clock. Hugh tried to convince Mia to leave with him, but she refused. She had promised her grandfather that she could never leave. She could only stay there. In truth, there had never been a curse on the Leal family. What was even worse than a curse was the twisted education and extreme control that the aristocratic family had over their daughters, which ultimately led to their mental instability. Viola was the most beautiful geisha in the town, and she had many suitors, but strangely, all the men who proposed to her had started flocking to Hugh's house, wanting to buy phantom books at a high price. To understand what was going on, Hugh and Dalian decided to follow a man named Armin and visit Viola. True to the rumors, Viola was as beautiful and captivating as described. Every movement she made seemed to radiate a unique charm, and Armin was utterly mesmerized by her. Dalian immediately asked Viola why she wanted the phantom books. It turned out that Viola had given 5 of her suitors a special marriage condition. They had to bring her 5 different phantom books. Thus, these 5 men, eager to win Viola's heart, went directly to Hugh and Dalian to buy the books, but to Dalian's surprise, Viola knew that Dalian was the legendary manager of Dantalian's bookshelf. Dalian, puzzled, asked how Viola knew this information. Viola replied that she didn't know herself. 3 years ago, when she arrived in this town, she had lost all her memories. Yet, strangely, her mind retained vast amounts of knowledge. Just then, a monster suddenly appeared. It told Viola that the time was almost up, and that the Count would appear on the next full moon night. It urged Viola to prepare to return home. After speaking, the monster flew away. Viola was scared stiff and collapsed to the ground. She had no idea who the Count was, but from the monster's tone, she could tell he was an extremely dangerous person. The reason she was searching for the phantom books was because her remaining memories told her that only by gathering these 5 books could she stand a chance against the Count. Dalian was confused. She couldn't understand why Viola insisted on staying in this town. Viola simply smiled and said, "There are people here I can't bear to leave behind." Meanwhile, the 5 suitors, having learned that Viola was in danger, rushed to her side on the night of the full moon, fully armed and bringing the phantom books with them. At that moment, the Count descended from the sky. Seeing him, everyone immediately launched an attack. Gunshots rang out, but the bullets did no harm to him whatsoever. With a gentle wave of his wand, the Count transformed everyone's blood into mercury. He then urged Viola to return with him, even calling her his daughter. Despite the Count's immense power, Dalian noticed that he wasn't using the power of the phantom books. Instead, he was manipulating magic with his own abilities. This meant that the Count was actually a true wizard. It turns out that Viola was not the true daughter of the Count, and she wasn't even a real human. She was a homunculus created by the Count through alchemy. The Count's initial intention in creating Viola was to see how close his creation could come to being human. He gave her a beautiful appearance and an intelligent mind, but he never expected that Viola would gradually develop self-awareness and ultimately betray him. As a result, the Count planned to take her back and study how she developed self-awareness. Just as the Count was gathering his magical power, Hugh immediately removed the seal from the Dantalian bookshelf, chose 5 phantom books from it, and bestowed their powers upon Viola's 5 suitors. The power of the phantom books instantly revived the dead. Faced with the overwhelming power of the 5 phantom books, the Count ultimately chose to surrender. He thought that if Viola, as a homunculus, could experience something like love, it would be a pleasant thing. Therefore, he decided to give Viola her freedom until she willingly returned to his side. With that, the Count vanished into a beam of light. Once the crisis was over, the 5 suitors knelt on one knee and simultaneously asked Viola to choose one of them as her husband. However, to everyone's surprise, Viola did not choose any of them. Instead, she turned around and ran toward a man who had not participated in the battle. Viola explained to everyone that she had met this man only after asking them to search for the phantom books. In the end, Viola happily left with the man, leaving the 5 men standing in place, utterly bewildered. The girl only had to take a whiff of Hugh's scent to conclude that he must be a good person. Then, all of a sudden, she turned to Hugh for help, saying that bad people were after her. In a panic, the girl snatched the bread right out of Hugh's hands and bolted, but that was Dalian's favorite fried bread. The girl ran as fast as she could, but she tripped and fell, and the fried bread scattered across the ground. That made Dalian furious. To make up for it, The girl's father personally bought a large serving of fried bread as an apology for Hugh and Dalian. It was only then that Hugh learned the girl's name was Fiona, the daughter of the chairman of a famous cosmetics company, and a well-known perfumer herself. The most popular fragrance at the moment, called Blue Enchantment, was created by her. Rumor had it that Fiona's family owned a phantom book, and it was her grandfather who had first used it to launch the perfume business. Since Fiona's father had no talent as a perfumer, he entrusted the book to Fiona instead. At that moment, someone came to inform Fiona's father that members of the product trading company had suddenly arrived. With guests at the house, Hugh had no choice but to take his leave. He decided he would visit Fiona later to ask about the phantom book. When they met Fiona again, she led them into her perfume laboratory. Fiona explained that she had an extremely sharp sense of smell, so sharp that she could even judge a person's thoughts through their scent. When Dalian didn't believe her, Fiona leaned in to sniff her and said she smelled wheat bran, butter, and olive oil on her, meaning Dalian was still hiding a piece of fried bread. It turned out that the men chasing Fiona at the bakery hadn't been bad people after all, but her father's subordinates. She admitted she had run away from home because she couldn't stand her father's ways, saying he only cared about money. The perfume called Blue Enchantment was actually a failed product. Her real dream wasn't just to make fragrances. She wanted to create a scent that could bring happiness to everyone. Fiona's goal in using the phantom book was to craft happiness through scent. But just as Dalian asked to see the phantom book, a delirious man suddenly stormed into the room. He demanded a fragrance called Residue, and warned that members of the product company were going to kill Fiona's father. By the time Fiona rushed home, her father had already been murdered. It turned out that Residue was a perfume whose scent caused hallucinations, eventually evolving into a new kind of drug, but Fiona hadn't created it intentionally. It was merely a defective byproduct that came out of making Blue Enchantment. Now that the product company had obtained the formula for Residue, they plotted to monopolize the profit by eliminating Fiona, the one who could manufacture it. To protect Fiona, Hugh immediately fought the enemy, but the opponent had taken so much residue that even with serious wounds, he felt no pain. At the critical moment, Fiona stepped forward and shielded Hugh from a fatal strike. Then she counterattacked using two perfumes she had crafted, one that heightened sensitivity, and another with hypnotic effects, successfully defeating all of their enemies. To save the gravely wounded Fiona, Dalian granted Hugh the right to open the door to the library, using illusionary arts to heal Fiona's wounds. But after recovering, Fiona made an unexpected move. She suddenly pulled out a perfume bottle and put Hugh to sleep with its scent, then set out alone to take revenge on the product company. To Hugh's surprise, Fiona wiped out everyone in the product company using nothing but perfume. When Hugh found her, he asked why she had done it. Fiona said it was her way of atoning for her sins. The truth was, Blue Enchantment could be diluted into residue. She had always known about its dangers, yet still handed the formula to her father. And her father, blinded by profit, sold the undiluted residue to the product company, which set everything into motion. After confessing everything, Fiona suddenly collapsed. She had taken a serious bullet wound in the earlier battle, and she believed it was heaven's punishment for her. Since the same life could only be saved once with illusionary magic, there was nothing more Dalian could do this time. In the end, Fiona expressed her heartfelt gratitude to Dalian before slowly closing her eyes. Perhaps due to a chemical reaction caused by residue, Fiona's perfume laboratory suddenly went up in flames, and from the sea of fire rose a fragrance, the very scent Fiona had pursued her entire life but never succeeded in creating. A scent that could make people feel true happiness. That day, the streets were suddenly overrun with hordes of zombies. After investigating, Dalian discovered that the source of this disaster was a phantom book called the Book of Atonement. This phantom book had the power to steal the reader's soul and turn them into zombies. What's more, its magic wasn't limited to the form of the book itself. So long as its text was properly arranged, any medium could be turned into a vessel for its power. Someone had taken advantage of this and infused the magic of the Book of Atonement into newspapers. Through mass distribution, the newspapers spread zombies throughout the entire city. To track down the mastermind, Hugh and Dalian followed the trail to a newspaper printing factory. There, they unexpectedly encountered the master of the Red Reading Princess, Raziel the Professor. Dalian was the Black Reading Princess, whose duty was to search for, collect, and safeguard phantom books to keep them from disturbing the order of the world. Raziel possessed the power to create phantom books, and often brought chaos to society, because their ideals were completely opposed. The two princesses clashed the moment they met, neither willing to yield. The professor's true purpose in spreading the Book of Atonement was to disrupt and sabotage an upcoming restoration conference in London, all for his own ambitions. He suddenly asked Hugh why he had chosen to become the keykeeper for the Black Reading Princess. Hugh thought for a moment before replying, "Because I want to save her." That answer clearly didn't satisfy the professor. He immediately fired his gun, wounding Hugh. The professor firmly believed that for society to advance, more phantom books had to be unleashed and used, not sealed away in a library. With that, he aimed his gun at Dalian. In a split second, Hugh pulled the trigger in return, then grabbed Dalian in his arms and leapt through a window to escape. The professor ordered a horde of zombies to hunt them down. Gritting his teeth through the pain, Hugh carried Dalian into a hiding place and asked her to open the library. Dalian knew that Hugh was trying to save someone. When Hugh was a child, he had once wandered into Dantalian's library. There, he had discovered another princess sealed inside. The White Reading Princess. She was the one who entrusted him with the key, which granted him the right to become the master of Dantalian's library. Hugh never forgot that encounter. He also understood the loneliness and helplessness she endured, sealed away in that library. So in his heart, he had always carried one wish: to rescue her. When Dalian opened the library's gate, Hugh's consciousness pierced through its boundaries. He found the White Reading Princess and tried to take her away from that prison, but the library's guardians blocked his path. Meanwhile, in the real world, Hugh was still on the run with Dalian as zombies closed in on them. Since the White Reading Princess controlled the flow of the library's space, her leaving would mean its destruction. For that reason, the guardians would never allow anyone to take her away. As Hugh fell into darkness, his body in the real world collapsed as well, while the White Reading Princess remained bound by heavy chains at the gate. When Hugh awoke, he found himself trapped in an unfamiliar space, unable to even remember who he was. Dalian stayed by his side, calling his name again and again. She tried to awaken his memory by reminding him of the good times they had once shared. Hearing her pleas, the White Reading Princess decided to join forces with Dalian to save Hugh. When Hugh's younger self appeared and handed a book to his present self, Hugh finally regained his memories and returned to the real world. To wipe out the zombies, Hugh began to chant slowly. As he chanted, visions of the White Reading Princess's past appeared before him. The White Princess and Dalian were once the same person. She had opened Pandora's box long ago, and her consciousness had wandered into Dantalian's library, where she was bound to guard phantom books. Meanwhile, her body became the Black Reading Princess. Dalian, stripped of her past memories and tasked with searching for and sealing phantom books. Although Hugh used the power of illusions to destroy the zombies, the professor's factory continued producing new phantom books. At that moment, the Silver Reading Princess Flam and her partner Hal arrived in time. Flam's mission was to destroy phantom books before they could endanger the world, an ideal she shared with Dalian. Together, they used the fire of calamity to destroy every phantom book inside the factory, and in doing so, saved Hugh, who was gravely injured. Afterward, the professor and Raziel continued fleeing across the land, spreading fear and panic wherever they went. Hal and Flam kept traveling, searching out phantom books to destroy before they could wreak havoc, and Hugh remained by Dalian's side, continuing their shared mission.